There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from trying too hard to be seen. You know the feeling. You explain yourself one more time, hoping this time they'll understand. You reach out again, even though you reached out yesterday. You soften your voice, choose your words carefully, make yourself smaller, more agreeable, more available, and still, something in the room doesn't shift. Still, the respect you're quietly aching for doesn't arrive. And then one day, almost by accident, you stop. Maybe you're tired. Maybe something in you finally gives out. You go quiet. You pull back. You stop explaining. And something strange happens. The dynamic changes. People notice you differently. There's a subtle shift in how they speak to you, how they treat you, how much space they give you in a conversation. This isn't a coincidence. And it isn't magic. It's psychology. And once you understand it, you can never quite unsee it. Let's start with what begging actually communicates. Not what you intend it to communicate, but what it signals at a deeper, almost instinctive level. When we beg for attention, for approval, for love, for respect, we are broadcasting something about our own internal state. We are saying, in effect, that we do not believe we deserve these things unless we fight for them. We are signaling scarcity, not scarcity in the other person, but scarcity in ourselves. A kind of inner poverty that we're hoping someone else will fill. Dale Carnegie, who spent his life studying how human beings actually relate to one another, understood this deeply. He observed that people are not drawn to need, they are drawn to warmth, to genuine interest, and to a certain quiet confidence that doesn't demand anything in return. Neediness, however understandable, tends to push people away, not because they are cruel, but because need, without self-possession, creates an uncomfortable pressure. It asks something of people that most of them don't know how to give. And here is the painful irony at the heart of this pattern. The more desperately you seek respect, the more you signal that you don't quite believe you're worthy of it. And people, consciously or not, tend to take you at your own valuation. Machiavelli, writing in a very different world about the nature of power and perception, observed something that still holds true in every office, every family, every relationship. He noted that how you are perceived often matters as much as who you actually are. Not because appearances are everything, but because human beings are social creatures who read signals constantly. We are always, whether we realize it or not, interpreting each other. And one of the clearest signals a person can send is whether or not they need your approval to feel whole. A prince who begs for loyalty, Machiavelli suggested, will rarely receive it. Not because loyalty is impossible, but because begging undermines the very foundation on which genuine respect is built. This isn't cynicism. It's an observation about human nature that once you see it, you'll recognize everywhere. The Stoics understood this from a different angle. Thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus returned again and again to a single clarifying idea. The only thing truly within your control is your own inner state, your judgments, your responses, your values. Everything outside of that, other people's opinions, their approval, their affection, is, in the Stoic framework, not yours to control. And the moment you begin to chase what you cannot control, you surrender the one thing you actually have, your own steadiness. This is not indifference. The Stoics were not cold people. Marcus Aurelius was a deeply compassionate emperor. Epictetus, who had been a slave, wrote with extraordinary tenderness about human suffering. What they were pointing to was not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to be governed by the need for external validation. There is a profound difference between caring about people and needing people to approve of you. One is love. The other is a kind of quiet desperation dressed up as love. So what actually happens, psychologically, when you stop begging? Several things shift at once. First, you stop leaking energy. When you are constantly seeking approval, you are in a state of low-grade anxiety. Your nervous system is oriented outward, scanning for signals, interpreting every pause in a conversation, every unreturned message, every slightly flat tone of voice. This is exhausting, and it shows. When you stop, when you genuinely redirect that energy inward, something in your presence changes. You become more settled, more present. And presence, real presence, is one of the most quietly powerful things a human being can offer. Second, you create what might be called psychological space. When you are always available, always explaining, always reaching, you fill every gap. There is no room for the other person to miss you, to wonder about you, to come toward you of their own accord. Distance, not coldness, but genuine self-containment, creates space. And in that space, something interesting often happens. People begin to move toward you, rather than away. This is one of the more counterintuitive truths in the psychology of respect. We tend to assume that closeness is built by constant contact, constant reassurance, constant demonstration of our value. But often, the opposite is true. Respect tends to grow in the presence of someone who doesn't need to prove themselves. Someone who is simply, quietly there, complete in themselves. Third, and perhaps most importantly, you begin to send a different message, signal about your own self-worth. Not through arrogance, not through performance, but through the simple, steady act of treating yourself as someone whose time, attention, and presence have value. This is not manipulation. It is not a tactic. It is the natural result of genuinely believing, at some level, that you are enough. And this is where the work actually lives. Because for most people, the begging isn't a strategy. It's a wound. It comes from somewhere real, from early experiences of having to earn love, a feeling that your presence alone was never quite sufficient, of learning that you had to perform or explain or shrink in order to be accepted. These patterns run deep. They don't dissolve simply because you understand them intellectually, but understanding is still the beginning. When you can see the pattern, when you can recognize the moment you're about to over-explain, over-apologize, overreach, you have a choice that you didn't have before. You can pause, you can breathe. You can ask yourself what you actually need in this moment, rather than what you're hoping someone else will give you. This is what genuine self-respect looks like in practice. Not a performance of confidence, not a cold withdrawal designed to make someone chase you, but a quiet, honest return to yourself. A recognition that your worth is not something that needs to be negotiated in every interaction. And when you begin to live from that place, even imperfectly, even inconsistently, something in your relationships begins to shift. People sense it. They may not be able to name it, but they feel the difference between someone who is present and someone who is pleading, between someone who is grounded and someone who is grasping. And almost universally, they respond to groundedness with something that looks very much like respect. You become unreachable or emotionally unavailable. It means you stop outsourcing your sense of value to other people's reactions. It means you become, in the truest sense, someone you can rely on. And that quality, more than almost anything else, tends to draw people in rather than push them away. The psychology of respect, at its deepest level, is really the psychology of self-possession, of knowing who you are clearly enough that you don't need constant confirmation, of being willing to be seen without performing, of understanding that the most powerful thing you can do in almost any relationship is simply to be fully, quietly, honestly yourself. That is not a small thing. For many of us, it is the work of a lifetime. But it begins with a single, simple act: stopping, breathing, returning to yourself, and trusting that who you are, without the begging, is already enough. If something in this video resonated with you, consider subscribing to Inside the Labyrinth. New explorations of psychology and human nature arrive every week. And if you'd like to go deeper, the next video on this channel may be exactly where you want to go next. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.